Anatomy and acupuncture. Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine have far more similarities than differences. While anatomy is often thought to be the realm of Western medicine, the first recorded use of the Chinese term for anatomy appears in the Huangdi Neijing Lingshu. Contrary to popular belief, ancient practitioners did not view these anatomical structures as purely functional or non-material entities. Although their exploration was not as in-depth as modern methods, their concrete approach to the human body, including anatomical studies, significantly influenced their understanding. Anatomical and structural aspects have always been integral to AHM, with certain eras being more material-focused and others more ideologically oriented. In the Huangdi Neijing Lingshu, written around the 1st century BC, the digestive tract is anatomically detailed from the mouth to the rectum, including length, width, diameter, capacity, shape, and position. The ratio of the esophagus to the intestines, presented as 1:36, closely matches the 1:37 ratio found in the anatomical drawings of German anatomist Spalteholz. In AD 16, during the Qin dynasty between the Western and Eastern Han dynasties, the Bacopa school developed precise anatomical measurements, stating the stomach is 1 chai 5 kun in size, 5 kun in circumference, 2 chai 6 kun in length, curved on the sides, and can hold 3 do 5 sheng of water and food. The Zhubing Yuanhou Lun, written around 610 AD, includes anatomical treatment methods for procedures such as artificial abortion, gastrointestinal surgery, and tooth extraction. Government-led dissections during the Song dynasty prompted revisions in existing physiological theories. The notion that fluids were separated at the junction between the large and small intestines, known as Lenmeng Fen Shui Shuo, likely emerged from dissections conducted at this time. Specialized AHM practitioners treating abscesses were skilled surgeons with extensive anatomical knowledge. They performed effective incisions and drainage of abscesses based on their anatomical expertise. Additionally, methods for setting bones and stabilizing joints in AHM are grounded in anatomical principles. The rich history of anatomy in AHM demonstrates that it was always a vital part of the practice, even though periods of ideological dominance sometimes overshadowed its importance. Traditional acupuncture based on meridian theory cannot be separated from anatomical knowledge. In AHM acupuncture, meridian-based techniques are only a small part of the practice. Among the 9 types of needles recorded in the Huangdi Neijing, the Yuan needle, Pi needle, and Da needle are not used for meridians. The Yuan needle is used to separate adhesions between muscles, the Pi needle is used for lancing abscesses, and the Da needle is used to treat muscles between bones and skin. The Ashi points are also unrelated to meridians and are very similar to modern trigger points. The Ashi points, muscle needles from the Zhenju Jingyan Fang, and Da needles used by Zhu Hanshang for removing adhesions are all acupuncture techniques based on anatomical knowledge. All traditional acupuncture methods based on the 12 meridians are also rooted in anatomy. For example, the location of the Yao Yangguan point is described as the depression between the 4th and 5th lumbar vertebrae, which is an anatomically based description. The Zhenju Jiai Jing specifies that the Dubi point should be inserted less than 1 kun between the knee joint, a limitation set to prevent joint cavity infection based on anatomical knowledge and experience. Many acupuncture points located on muscles are described as the space between the muscles, indicating fascia where muscles meet, which is also an anatomical explanation. Just because the names of acupuncture points are in Chinese characters does not mean they are exclusive to AHM and devoid of anatomical basis. Names like Wangu, SI4, referring to the carpal bones, Jianyu, LI15, meaning the shoulder corner, Zusanli, ST36, referring to the 0.3 kun below the knee, and Shousanli, LI10, referring to the 0.3 kun below the elbow, are all based on anatomical structures. However, the anatomical knowledge actively utilized during the early formation of AHM became less emphasized as theoretical works like the Huangdi Neijing became central to the practice. By the Song dynasty, Neo-Confucianism dominated political philosophy, which prohibited bodily mutilation and considered dissection highly unethical. This conceptual and ideological philosophy led to a decline in empirical studies until the Ming dynasty. Chinese anatomy showed signs of decline. The anatomical illustrations in the 14th century Manual of Myriad Healers look more detailed than the illustration in the 16th century's book, Introduction to Medicine. This shift reflects the extent to which Neo-Confucianism, an idealistic philosophy, dominated society at the time. This trend is very similar to the impact of medieval Christianity on anatomy. In Europe, the rapid rise of the merchant class, the subsequent dissolution of the alliance between monarchy and Christianity, the Renaissance, and the various civic revolutions allowed for a departure from religious dogma and the flourishing of free artistic and medical research activities. This period marked a significant divergence in the development of anatomy between the East and the West. If we compare the anatomical illustrations from 14th century China, England, and Persia, we can observe that they were not drastically different. However, Western anatomy underwent a major transformation in the 16th century with the work of the Italian physician Andreas Vesalius. The illustrations below clearly show the significant differences in anatomical knowledge between the East and the West during the same period. Interestingly, Vesalius also faced considerable challenges from the church and his medical peers. His contemporaries accused him of desecrating the revered Galen and claimed that the bodies he dissected, being those of criminals, were not representative of ordinary people. Ultimately, he was expelled from his university. Yet, the larger historical currents were in Vesalius's favor. His book De Humani Corporis Fabrica was a tremendous success and remains a milestone in the history of medicine. Had Vesalius been born a century earlier, he might have been burned at the stake. This transformation in Western medicine extended to Japan during the Age of Exploration. Among China, Korea, and Japan, Japan was the first to embrace Western knowledge, including medicine. From the late Edo period, Japanese scholars began to criticize the more conceptual aspects of AHM and promote an empirical approach, leading to the establishment of the Koho school, which still influences Japanese AHM today. In 1757, a Japanese physician named Yamawaki Toyo, who worked in a judicial capacity, conducted dissections on cadavers and published his findings in an anatomical book called Zoshiji. From a young age, Toyo questioned whether the traditional Chinese theory of the 5 viscera and 6 bowels was accurate and sought to verify it through direct observation of actual cadavers. His empirical approach highlighted discrepancies between traditional Chinese theories and actual anatomy, arguing that medicine should be based on direct observation. Although Toyo's work was influenced by Western science, it is noteworthy that such an initiative arose from within the AHM community itself. In 1774, Sugita Genpaku translated a Dutch anatomy book and published Kaitai Shinsho, the first modern Japanese anatomy book. Sugita Genpaku was a physician with keen judgment but limited proficiency in Dutch. He had access to Tafel Anatomia and collaborated with Meino Ryotaku, a doctor with basic knowledge of Dutch, and Nakagawa Junan, a younger colleague from his hometown. They decided to undertake the translation in 1771 after observing the dissection of a criminal's corpse and confirming the accuracy of the anatomical drawings in Tafel Anatomia. Meino Ryotaku, the elder and the one familiar with Dutch, led the translation. Since they were not proficient in reading, they focused on the illustrations, using the position of the words and the human body to deduce their meanings. They skipped over grammatical elements they could not understand and inferred the meaning of abstract terms. This monumental publication in Japanese medical history resulted from such efforts. Although Meino Ryotaku, who played a significant role in the translation, abandoned the project shortly before its completion, Sugita Genpaku finished the task and thus left his name in history. An interesting fact is that Sugita Genpaku is known only as a figure who criticized Kampo medicine and led the introduction and spread of Dutch studies. However, in his later years, he returned to Kampo medicine, stating that Western anatomy couldn't provide any help in treatment or clinical practice. The significant difference between Kaitai Shinsho and Toyo's Zoshi is that the former is a translation of a Western medical text, rather than an independent effort by a traditional physician. The anatomical illustrations in Kaitai Shinsho also look more delicate than the crude and unrefined images in Zoshi. Although China was not as radical as Japan, the influence of Western science brought changes to AHM during the Qing dynasty. In 1830, Wang Qingren published Yilin Gaituo, which, although not the first record of anatomical knowledge, corrected long-standing misconceptions, such as the belief that urine originated from the intestines and that the lungs had 24 holes. Observing corpses discarded in public cemeteries and execution grounds, Wang discovered anatomical structures previously unmentioned in AHM, including the abdominal aorta, pancreas, and diaphragm. He also identified the brain, rather than the heart, as the center of thought and memory. To treat illness without understanding the viscera and bowels is no different from a blind man walking in the dark. Wang Qingren. In Korea, during the modern era, there were no independent efforts by traditional physicians to advance anatomical studies. The political isolation from Western influences and the dominance of Confucian values until the late Joseon dynasty made the dissection of corpses impossible. The first anatomy book in Korean was a translation of Gray's Anatomy by Kim Pil-sun, a graduate of Severance Medical School, which is quite unfortunate. Efforts in the modern era to develop anatomical studies within the field of traditional Chinese medicine disappeared due to external influences. By the late 20th century, Korea, China, and Japan all went through processes of modernization and scientific advancement that led to the suppression of traditional medicine. It wasn't until approximately 30 to 50 years later that traditional medicine began to reemerge within official frameworks. By the late 20th century, traditional Chinese medicine emphasized its differences from Western medicine to justify its existence and necessity. The interpretation by Yun Tieqiao that the 5 organs described in the Huangdi Neijing are not the same as the physical organs highlights this shift. To avoid outright rejection of traditional theories when interpreting organs and meridians as anatomical entities, many practitioners abandoned the concept of physicality and reinterpreted traditional Chinese medicine's main concepts in an abstract manner that could coexist with modern science. By framing AHM as a spiritual, functional, and abstract form of medicine unrelated to anatomy, its proponents were able to justify its coexistence with Western medicine. Historically, science, including anatomy, has always been a part of AHM. However, during the modernization process, AHM distanced itself from its empirical and structural roots as a survival strategy, which is deeply ironic. Modern AHM remains a conceptualized version, severed from its empirical and substantial past. As modern practitioners, it is crucial to reflect on what constitutes authentic AHM.